Please don't forget subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to get notified of new daily videos.
My great-aunt, rest her soul, was a strange woman. She lived alone in a sprawling, slightly decrepit Victorian house nestled deep in the New England woods, a good 2-hour drive from any major city. When she passed, Lee, her closest living relative by some obscure lineage, inherited the place. I'm a graphic designer, and the thought of quiet solitude, away from the city bustle, to focus on my freelance projects, was incredibly appealing. At first, it was idyllic. The scent of aged wood and damp earth, the symphony of crickets at night. Then the small things started. I'd swear I left my coffee mug on the kitchen counter, only to find it meticulously placed on my bedside table. A book I was reading would vanish from my desk and reappear on a shelf I hadn't touched in weeks. I chalked it up to stress, the novelty of a new environment, or simply, an old house's eccentricities. But the quirks grew stranger. I called my friend Zoe one Tuesday, discussing a new client project we'd brainstormed just the day before. She sounded utterly confused. "Lee, what are you talking about? We haven't discussed any new client. I haven't seen you since last week." My blood ran cold. I distinctly remembered the video call, the specific ideas we'd tossed back and forth. I even had notes. I looked for the notebook. It was there, but the page where I'd scrawled our ideas was blank. Fresh, unmarked. The house itself began to subtly shift. A creaking floorboard I'd learned to avoid suddenly wasn't there, or it was in a different spot. A window I'd admired, looking out into the dense woods from the landing, became a solid wall. I'd walk into the living room, certain of the armchair's placement, only to find it angled differently, facing a wall it had never faced before. I started taking photos, documenting everything, trying to anchor my reality. But sometimes, when I reviewed the photos, the discrepancies were there, not as I remembered taking them, but as the room now was. It was like the camera was also part of the trick. Then came the symbol, a tangled knot, intricate and unsettling, like a distorted Möbius strip or an infinite loop that had gone horribly wrong. I first noticed it carved faintly into an old wooden windowsill in the attic. A few days later, a similar knot appeared, seemingly stained into the fabric of an antique tablecloth I hadn't touched. It felt like a signature, a mocking signature. I was terrified I was losing my mind. Desperate, I drove to the nearest small town, seeking out Donovan, the local historian at the quaint, dusty library. He was an elderly man, sharp-eyed, with an encyclopedic knowledge of regional folklore. I haltingly described my experiences, leaving out the most outlandish parts but mentioning the symbol. Donovan's eyes widened. He produced an old, brittle tome, its pages filled with faded script and crude illustrations. "The Weaver," he whispered, tracing a finger over a drawing that was unmistakably the tangled knot. "An ancient dread, they say, not a creature, not really, more like a force. It unspools reality, particularly in places where the veil is thin, where a single soul dwells in quiet isolation. It feeds on consistency, on perceived reality. When you notice the changes, Lee, you make yourself visible to it." He spoke of old tailies, of people who woke up to worlds that weren't their own, of some who simply vanished, leaving behind houses that seemed to have forgotten them. He even hinted at an incident in my very house, decades ago, where the previous occupant was simply gone one morning, with no sign of foul play. I rushed home, heart-pounding. Donovan's words had terrified me, yet also given me a horrifying framework for what I was experiencing. I locked the doors, drew the blinds, but it was useless. The house was alive with the weaver's work. The staircase now had an extra step, then an entire landing vanished. Doors I'd passed 1,000 times led into darkened, unfamiliar rooms, smelling of damp earth and something acrid. The furniture seemed to writhe, its form never quite solid, like reflections on disturbed water. The symbol was everywhere now, etched into the walls, shimmering in the glass of the windows, even seeming to pulse from the patterns in the wallpaper. I called Zoe, my voice trembling. "It's happening, Zoe, it's real, the house, it's not my house anymore." Her voice was strangely flat. "Lee, you need to calm down, you've been under a lot of stress. I think you need to come stay with me. You're talking nonsense." Her words were too precise, too dismissive. It was Zoe. Or it was Zoe, but the weaver had already gotten to my perception of her, too. I looked into the cracked antique mirror in the hall, and for a split second, instead of my own reflection, I saw the tangled knot, vast and indifferent, staring back. I fled. I threw on clothes, grabbed my keys, and ran out the front door, not looking back. The forest seemed to stretch on forever, the trees pressing in, twisting into shapes I didn't recognize. The road out felt impossibly long, the landmarks wrong, familiar turns leading to strange, unkempt paths. I drove until the sun came up, until my eyes burned, until I was miles and miles away from that house. I eventually made it to Zoe's apartment. She was there just as I remembered, but her eyes held a subtle unfamiliarity. When I tried to explain, she just patted my hand gently, urging me to rest, to see a doctor. She didn't acknowledge my frantic phone call from the night before, the one where her voice had changed. She said I hadn't called her. I check my phone, no outgoing call log. I don't know where I am, not really. My world feels like wet clay, constantly being reshaped by an unseen hand. I saw the tangled knot in a coffee stain on Zoe's counter this morning. I don't know if this is my Zoe or a convenient replacement. I don't know if I truly escaped, or if the weaver simply rearranged my world around me, continuing its silent, terrifying work. I keep seeing the symbol, in the grain of wood, in the patterns of leaves. I don't know what's real anymore, and I'm starting to wonder if I ever did.
If you enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up button to like it. And please do subscribe to support the channel.